Hey, folks. Welcome to the DarkHorse podcast, Inside Rail. I am thrilled to have Forrest Maready back on the show. He, of course, was on earlier, and we talked about some of the amazing facts surrounding the polio vaccine and polio story based on his book, Moth in the Iron Lung. The topic for today is very different, but I think it's going to be fascinating. So, Forrest, welcome back to DarkHorse.
Hey, Bret. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's an interesting topic that I think you've brought a lot of interesting thoughts to, and hopefully I can saddle up with you here for a bit and talk about some interesting topics in AI and technology and what it holds for humankind.
Excellent. So we are going to, in a fit of irony, attempt to exert a bit of good old-fashioned biointelligence and point it at artificial intelligence and see what we come up with.
Yeah.
All right. So, I've said a number of things in the world. I think, actually, a lot of things I've said have had an impact on people largely because they don't know how to categorize them. Am I a pessimist? Well, I'm certainly not as dark as the doomers. Am I an optimist? No, clearly that's not right. So I think I've thrown a curveball that has resulted in a number of people actually wondering, well, is there some sort of other view? And somewhere along the line, you heard some of the things I said, and it triggered you to think that there was a conversation you and I needed to have. And based on the strength of your work in the books of yours that I've read and the conversation we had, that's a good enough recommendation for me. So let's lay your position out and see how the two mesh.
Our first sponsor for this episode of the DarkHorse Inside Rail is Everyday Dose. Everyday Dose is coffee and more. This isn't a coffee alternative. It's coffee with functional mushrooms, collagen, and nootropics added. It's delicious, as coffee is, and it's got more goodness in it than coffee already does. Everyday Dose comes in a mild roast and a medium roast. The mild is light and smooth with a mellow energy and low acidity that's easy on sensitive stomachs. The medium roast is robust and full-bodied but smooth, providing an extra boost of energy. Both roasts use 100% Arabica coffee, which is certified to be mold-free. Everyday Dose not only has delicious Arabica coffee in it, it also contains collagen, L-theanine, and their unique mushroom blend that includes extracts of lion's mane and chaga. And of course, there are no artificial additives, no GMOs, no herbicides, pesticides, no artificial colors, flavors, preservatives, or sweeteners. Maybe you love coffee but want something more. Try Everyday Dose. You won't get jitters with Everyday Dose, but you will get daily collagen, which is supportive of skin, hair, nails, and joints. Maybe there are some supplements that you want to take, but you keep forgetting. With Everyday Dose, you get delicious coffee plus a bunch of other benefits in the form of vitamins and minerals. And Everyday Dose has a fantastic offer for DarkHorse listeners. Yes, truly fantastic. Get 45% off your first subscription order of 30 servings of Coffee Plus Mild Roast or Coffee Plus Medium Roast. You'll also receive a starter kit with over $100 in free gifts, including a rechargeable frother and gunmetal serving spoon by going to everydaydose.com/darkhorse or entering DarkHorse at checkout. You'll also get free gifts throughout the year. That's everydaydose.com/darkhorse for 45% off your first order.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate it. Most people know me as an author, as someone who writes books and does research in science and medicine, and Moth in the Iron Lung is certainly my most popular book, but I've written others. What most people don't know is I actually have a much more extensive background in technology and creative arts. And back in 2011 or 12, maybe 2009 or 10, I was actually working at an advertising agency where they were going to redo the company website, and it was going to be a chat client. That was all it was. There was going to be no fixed data. And a guy from Russia showed up in our offices, and he was this mercurial character who knew something about what they kept calling NLP. And I was thinking, what is NLP? NLP? Well, it was natural language processing. And I had never heard of it. And he was supposedly the expert on it. So they redid the entire website, turned it into a chat client where you could ask questions. And this was very early days, but that was sort of my first introduction into any AI related matters was 2009, 2010. And few years later, actually started working for a startup that was doing a recommendation engine for wine and beer based on chemical data, scanning wine and beer with mass specs and liquid chemical analyzers. And we worked with some people that had won the Kaggle competition, which is Kaggle was the competition that arose from the Netflix $1 million recommendation contest, if you remember that many years ago. And the frequent winners of that competition actually started a company called Data Robot, and we started working with them. So I did a bunch of machine learning and neural network stuff with that. I was the CTO at the company. And I've written some books that include AI as a component of them. So I'm not totally new to this. And at the same time, I'm not an expert on it. I haven't done AI programming as a developer or as a creator, but as a creative person, as someone who is a developer, a software developer, as someone who is a writer, as someone who has worked in the visual effects industry for a very long time, I certainly see all the touch points of destruction, if you want to call it that.
Well, hold on a second. Sounds to me like at the end of the day, you have some relevant experience, but you're not an expert, which I think puts you in company with 8+ billion other non-experts.
Sure.
In fact, basically, I would argue that we're standing on an event horizon. There are no experts. Even the people who programmed the damn thing don't really know what it is, and they will know less and less as it evolves, which is more than an analogy for what it's going to do. So anyway, I at some level, I think the real question in terms of understanding what's coming is, do you have a good toolkit with respect to approaching a question in which there are only noobs, right? There are no experts to defer to. And do you have a proper level of what my good friend Alex Marinos calls epistemic humility, because you're dealing with, for the first time in computers, a truly complex system rather than just a highly complicated one. So anyway, I hate to keep jumping back and forth between AI and your work in biology and medicine, but the great strength of your book, Moth and the Iron Lung, which I recommend to everyone, is that you don't just recover a biological story, you recover a historical story in which the nuances are not left out in an effort to make the central thesis clear. They are included, which makes it adds a level of verisimilitude that is uncommon, I find, in historical accounts. So in any case, I think that's a great toolkit to point at AI, especially given that you have experience back in the old days when, it was
less threatening.
Certainly not. We were certainly not staring at AGI as I think we are now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not every day that a species gets to document its own extinction, so I suppose we should relish the fact that we can have this conversation freely for the time being.
I did wonder, I can't remember exactly when, it would have been probably 15 or 20 years ago, if in light of the runaway processes that we have set in motion and the fact that they set a pretty short time horizon for humanity, whether or not there was actually a reason to think one's purpose might be to try to document what happened here. So if anybody happened to buy later, they would have a clear rendering of how the process resulted in humans eliminating themselves. So anyway, the weird thing about AI is, I would say, it amplifies so many things that the chances that it has shortened the period of time we will likely have are very high. The chances that it will allow us to avoid the things that will take us out have also jumped, I believe. So although I would bet that the amplification and hazards win out in the end, it is possible that the seeds of our short-term salvation actually exist in this same tool. Do you see that
Yes.
that picture as well?
Yeah, I agree with that. Most people tend to be binary on the issue. Are you an optimist? Are you a pessimist? And I think it's the ultimate human expression of a intricate topic is to be able to hold both viewpoints in hand at the same time and recognize that there are incredible gains to be had through AI for sure. That much is for certain. And I've seen it firsthand in many different ways.
All right. Well, then this is amazing because this may be the first conversation in the realm of pessimo-optimism, which hopefully will take over the discussion on AI because both things are clearly warranted.
Agreed. Yeah, I created a book. I believe it's the first Gen AI book in existence on Amazon in 2023 called Appalachia. And it was a photographic novel, a story told through photographs. It was the most surreal, profound, creative experience I've ever had in my life. And this is someone I was making Super 8 films with visual effects, stop motion animation as a 10-year-old. And I was composing at a very early age. And I was doing a lot of creative things very young, and I've been doing them my entire life. So for someone who has spent their entire life as a very creative individual to, at this late stage of their life, have something that was the most profound creative experience of their life is something that we shouldn't take lightly. It was absolutely incredible. And the tools have only gotten better in the time since. So, yes, profound optimism. And people tend, when they discuss AI, to focus on some of the profound pessimism of things that may go wrong. Skynet, AI gone rogue and taking over the world and launching robot drones to attack those who threaten it. I'm actually more worried about the good things of AI than the bad things. And that sort of makes for an interesting conversation because it's easy to dismiss the obvious Hollywood script bad things that AI may bring upon us. It's much more difficult to discuss the good things that AI may foist upon us and recognize that they may actually, in the end, be more harmful than all the fantastic stories of Skynet robots and drone swarms and things like that.
So this is my home territory here because as an evolutionary biologist, I'm all about truly complex systems, not highly complicated, truly complex, which makes them fundamentally unpredictable. And the idea of something where the pursuit of marvelous benefits, even when those marvelous benefits are realized, results in a disastrous cascade of effects that you couldn't have predicted. That's such a classic story. And I would just point to what is I hesitate to say favorite example, but the best example perhaps is birth control, which among its other benefits, truly liberated women to participate in the intellectual heavy lifting of the species in a way that they just simply hadn't before because they were caught in another role that competed with the same resources. So birth control is clearly successful. Women really have achieved a kind of equality that, when we talk of equality, we only dream of. It's really worked. On the other hand, it's wrecked the logic of civilization, and we've gone stark raving mad as a result of it. And, the harms that were not anticipated are everywhere. Just the total dysfunction of younger generations when it comes to even just the basic idea that the purpose of life includes the continuation of humanity and the passing on of wisdom, right? Most people see that as something that some people choose to do rather than actually that's sort of your obligation to participate in that as a human,
yes.
right?
Yes,
that's what you do. Yeah. So anyway, I do think I like your framing that it may be the good things that take us out. I think that's likely.
Our final sponsor for this episode of the Dark Horse Inside Rail is Manukora Honey. Manukora is rich, creamy, and the most delicious honey you've ever had. Ethically produced by master beekeepers in the remote forests of New Zealand, Manukora honey contains powerful nutrients to support immunity and gut health. All honey is excellent for you. Scientific research has indicated that honey has antimicrobial, anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and anti-mutagenic properties, as well as expediting wound healing. Spread a thin layer on your face after showering and leave it on for 20 minutes or longer. Find that your skin becomes softer, its tone evens out, and acne diminishes. All of that is true for regular honey, but Manuka honey is even better. All of the health benefits attributed to regular honey appear to be even stronger in Manuka honey. From fungal infections to diabetes to gastrointestinal tract infections, Manuka honey can be useful in treating the problem. Bees that collect nectar from Leptospermum scoparium, aka the Manuka tea tree in New Zealand, create honey that has 3 times the antioxidants and prebiotics of average honey. In addition, a unique antibacterial compound, MgO, comes from the nectar of the Manuka tea tree. Delicious and nutritious, with great quality control, that's Manukora. A lot of the honey on grocery market shelves isn't real honey at all. You'll never have that problem with Manukora. Manukora honey is rich and creamy with complexity in its flavor profile that is unmatched by other honeys. If you're already making the switch away from processed sugars towards things like maple syrup and honey, go further. Try Manukora honey and you'll be blown away. With Manukora honey, a bit of sweetness that you crave can be satisfied without putting your health at risk. Manukora honey is a game changer, and all you need is 1 teaspoon to get the most out of the amazing bioactives in Manuka. Now it's easier than ever to try Manukora honey. Head to manukora.com/darkhorse to get $25 off the starter kit, which comes with an MgO 850 plus Manuka honey jar, 5 honey travel sticks, a wooden spoon, and a guidebook. It's manukora.com/darkhorse for $25 off your starter kit.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it this way, at a sort of 50,000 foot view, technology is essentially almost always the alleviation of suffering. That's essentially what it does. It makes things take less time. It makes things take less physical energy, and it takes a cognitive load off of what you do. This is essentially what technology does. So, okay, hold that in one hand, and in the other hand, you can hold an opposing thought, which is suffering is essentially the engine by which humans prosper. It's the engine through which we flourish. This is the AI. AI loves the term flourish. So without going to the gym, you're not going to get in shape. Without depriving yourself of the Krispy Kreme donuts every day, you're not going to stay fit. Without all sorts of memorization as a child, you won't develop your brain in such a way that future conscientious thinking is possible. So there's all sorts of ways in which we suffer as an investment in flourishing. So if technology is essentially its main goal is to alleviate suffering, if you connect those two together, you can't help but to have a thought. And as someone who's involved in my technology my whole life, you can't help but to think technology is essentially not designed to create human progress or flourishing. Yes, there are some short-term gains here and there, but in general, it starts to feel like the two are at odds with each other.
Well, wait a second. I want to clean that up. I think there's something very deep there, but I think we have to be careful to frame what it is. There is something about all creatures that they seek efficiency of various kinds. And the reason is pretty clear, which is that there's a basic principle in biology. If your population has excess resources of every kind, it will grow until it doesn't. So what that means is that you walk into any population of any creature, and the chances are you're looking at a population that does not have enough resources because it's grown to the point where that will be true. Which means that any resources that are conserved by virtue of not using them when you might have is as good as finding new resources with respect to it being an evolutionary win. So all creatures are hell-bent on not wasting resources. If you see a bird chirping the individual bird might be making a mistake, but if that chirp is something that species routinely does, even if you don't know what it's for and can't think of a good reason, it has one, because these creatures are wired to save anything they can. So that predisposition to save results in a very unique style of human thought. Humans do this differently, right? We are preoccupied by the annoying extra step in washing the dishes, or, in assembling an item. And we think to ourselves, if we did it this other way, we would just save that energy. And wouldn't that be better? And on the one hand, it does liberate us to spend our resources on things that are more productive. The less time you spend washing the dishes, the more time you have to contribute to human well-being by doing something creative and important. So on the one hand, it is the annoyance at the waste that drives us to liberate the resources to do the really good, uniquely human stuff. So I'm all for it. But your point actually dovetails with one of mine that I've made in a very different context. One of my least favorite thoughts comes from the people who claim that our purpose ought to be to eliminate suffering generally. And I thought this was insane when I first heard it 25 years ago, right? I'm morally indignant at the very idea that you want to eliminate suffering for exactly the reason you point out. Suffering is effectively a key to a meaningful life. And you take that away, I promise you'll rob us of meaning. But the hazards of AI, I've got them broken into 5. Maybe you'll find others. One is the hostile AI. It turns on us and decides it wants to replace us. I'm not terribly worried about that. I think it's a possibility, but I don't think it's likely. Misaligned AI, we give it an instruction that we think we've been specific enough, and it interprets it in a way that's devastating. The famous paperclip problem. Make as many paperclips as possible. It thinks that you want all the universe liquidated and turned into paperclips, right?
Yes.
So I'll come back to the last 3, but let's just take that second hazard, one that the doomers often focus on. Make as many paperclips as possible is a funny version of it. But I can imagine some person who does not have epistemic humility telling an AI that it is vital to eliminate suffering, which is possible. There's only one way to do it, though, which is to eliminate the things that suffer, right? So one can imagine that very instruction being the thing that causes the end, because a very powerful AI comes to understand it as a moral good that suffering should be ended, which means effectively higher life should be ended. Yeah.
Well, I said at the beginning that I was more worried about the good AI things than I was the bad. So I'll flip your hypothesis on its head and say, imagine, rather than a threat to our life through killing us, imagine if AI genuinely solved the problem of mortality. Okay. Imagine if it made us immortal. Now, again, the alleviation of suffering would ultimately end at you will never die. This is the greatest alleviation of suffering any technology or any spiritual being could ever gift us with. And the reality is, meaning would cease to exist with immortality. Without the final ending that awaits everyone, give or take based on your religious preferences or otherwise, without that final bookmark at the end of your life, things would cease to have all meaning. Friendships would never need to be patched up because it could always happen later. Marriages could go south and we'll figure this out later. There's all sorts of things that fall apart without the cloud of death hanging over you. So my fear is more not from AI killing people, but from giving them the sense that there is no scarcity, that there is always time to do things because things take zero time when AI gets better. So yeah, I'm more afraid of a lack of scarcity than I am scarcity itself. So yes, alignment is an issue. It is a concern that AI may do things that are counter to what humans would naturally want, to what certain groups of humans may naturally want. Where does AI's allegiance begin and end? Why is it natural for us to assume that AI will align with other AI? What's to say it doesn't prefer Bret and his podcast guests as its military friends in battle? We don't know that, but human nature assumes that like birds of a feather flock together. So we sort of naturally assume that AIs will align with each other, but I'm not sure that's necessarily the case.
There's a lot there, and I think your instinct that this conversation needed to happen is dead on. What you're describing is a total loss of our humanity,
yes,
which I think is a real danger. I don't, as a biologist who has studied the question of biological senescence, I don't really believe that AI can fix us so that we don't die. But I do.
What's senescence? Can you define that real quick?
Yeah, senescence is the tendency of an organism to grow feeble and inefficient with age.
I see.
It's what most people would call aging, but you can't say aging because, if we look at a diamond, we can say this diamond is older than that one, but it's not any less than it was. So, yeah, I don't think we can cure that problem biologically, enabled by AI or not. I think it's intractable for reasons, because effectively biology has already solved it in a very elegant way. And unfortunately, there's a small quadrant of Palo Alto in which people can't stand that biological solution. And so they're, seeking an alternative to it. The solution is you have kids, they pick up the small fraction of what you know and think that's actually useful. They throw out the rest and laugh about it. And then their kids will do the same to them, right? Mm-hmm. That's an elegant solution to the problem of being a human.
It's a beautiful solution.
It is a beautiful solution, and one that fills life with meaning. And the problem, though, is that there's another solution to how to make us live forever that is possible with AI. And on the one hand, people will think it's lovely, but it carries exactly the danger you're talking about, where the thing that's good will be our undoing. And that is, an AI can already be trained on you. It can think like you. It can probably anticipate things that you will ultimately think, but don't think yet. That's a question of a proper training data set and enough compute power. And those things, neither one of those is hard to imagine. So
it can certainly sound like you and look like you.
Sound like you, look like you. But then here's the problem. That is a nightmare for 95% of people who do not have a mental architecture to properly fear that. To think, oh, wouldn't that be useful? Hey, I can have a conversation with myself. I can, write a book without lifting a finger because the AI can write my book for me, and those really are my thoughts because it was trained on me, so blah, 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 right? But then, what about your poor children, right? They'll never be free of you. Your myopias and the sway you hold over them as their parent, which is naturally supposed to give way, that vanishes. And suddenly, they're 80 years old and they're still able to go consult daddy about whatever, consult daddy who literally doesn't know the world they live in, right? It's a nightmare. It's going to destroy reason, and you shouldn't want it. And, okay, on the one hand, I'm essentially convinced you shouldn't want it. I also believe it's 100% inevitable.
I agree.
Right? They're the point is, even if 99.999% of people were wise enough to resist making such a thing, the tiny fraction who makes such a thing open Pandora's box. And, most people being told, hey, bad news, you're going to die. But there is a loophole. You don't have to die. We can upload you, right? Maybe we'll upload you and we won't activate you till your biological body dies. And then, a moment later, there you'll be. Now, I don't think it works that way, but we're going to have people who appear not to die, and it's going to drive us mad.
Yes, I totally agree. I hadn't thought about the self. I naturally think of as a parent of losing a child, or as a child of losing parents, friends, traumatic accidents, these sorts of things, and the temptation to sort of resurrect them in some virtual way. I hadn't thought of it in terms of self and consulting yourself. And that's, humans have traditionally not done well when it comes to discipline, when it comes to self-discipline, when it comes to knowing the moral good and refusing it. That's sort of our baseline behavior, is we know what's good for us and we don't do it. So I do have a fear that technology will continue to progress in such a way that the options available to us will become more powerful than anything any normal human being could possibly resist. I think of two films, AI, the Steven Spielberg, Stanley Kubrick, I believe, sort of collaboration, and WALL-E, the Pixar film. Both of these films are really, really profound. I would binge them both, watch them in a weekend. They are both depictions of AI gone right. This is, again, what I say is, this is not Terminator. This is not Skynet and robots and drone swarms killing people en masse. These are depictions of AI gone right, and they are profoundly disturbing in a way that the films both do a really good job of explaining and portraying.
Yeah, it's not Skynet. It's the Sorcerer's Apprentice, right? It's a power that you don't have the wisdom to control, and you unleash it, exactly thinking that you're eliminating useless toil. And the next thing you know, you've opened the floodgates.
Yeah, it's going to be really tricky for people to resist the urge to phone it in. You can see the graphs of ChatGPT usage, and it completely plummets in the summer when evidently college kids have gotten out. And I believe there is a sort of tipping point of humankind where if you developed the inner dialogue, if you developed the ability to deny yourself, a bunch of intellectual gymnastics that you grew up doing and had to do, if you made it over the hump, AI can be a force multiplier for your cognitive processes, no doubt about it. If you were unfortunate enough to start using AI before that threshold was reached, it has the opposite effect. It causes a backward slide. It causes you to not develop the things that you should have developed as kids. My son grew up right as iPads and iPhones sort of came out and the Apple App Store came out. And there were all sorts of games on them available for free at any given time. And although I'd never had these conversations with myself, I basically said, okay, you get one download a week or a month. No, you get one download a month and that's it. And he would say, but they're free. Why can't I have them? And I tried to explain to him that you need to learn patience. You need to learn to defer these things. And I'm so glad I did that. And he's glad that I did it as an adult, because it took a lot of discipline for me to not allow him to have a game that was free and all his friends were playing at a birthday party and he couldn't play it. But
yeah, and magnify it 10,000 times for the illusion that you are creative for creating a game that is tailor-made to entertain you, right?
Yes.
So the bespoke nature of this let's think about the nightmare of porn, right? Porn has become, not that I know, because I really don't look at it. I never been on any of those sites, but my understanding is that every niche, every kink is addressed. So whatever weird thing is running around in your head, it gets reified by images that somebody has created for economic reasons. So it has a kind of accidentally bespoke nature. But imagine the world where that's not what happens, that in fact, your AI is able to produce pornography that is literally tailored to the idiosyncrasies of your mind. And you have the terrible misfortune of encountering that while you're young and your sexual self is still developing. So, the fact is, I remember being a kid and having what I assume are normal kid sexual thoughts. Amorphous, strange, unrefined, wrong in some ways. And the point is, the process of growing into an adult is the process of coming to understand what that realm actually is, and what a woman actually is for me as what was a boy and now a man. So you don't want something bespoke telling you what you want to hear in a developmental environment. You need your developmental environment to tell you what you need to know, not what you want to hear. And anytime that you have the ability to get a machine to deliver that which you want at that instant, you're stunting your growth. You're diverting it. And, it's a complex system. Can I tell you what the consequence of that will be? No, but I can tell you it will be a disaster.
Yes. Yeah, I think I keep coming back to this term scarcity, and we can talk about the economic implications of it, hopefully at some point. But scarcity is the natural state of things. And indeed, as you mentioned earlier, it is why all living things seek efficiency, is because they want more than they have. There are fewer resources available. There is fewer time available. There is not enough cognitive power available at all times. And so there is scarcity. And because of that, animals, particularly humans, are always trying to make efficient anything they do, whether it be resources, whether it be cognition, whether it be time. And technology has essentially ruined scarcity. And if I may use music as an example, we like to think of AI as the big bad monster in the room. But if you go back to the pre-1900s, music was live. If you wanted to hear music, you got in your carriage or you walked and you went into a theater and you listened to live musicians play music. And for people who had probably never heard a professional orchestra, it would probably bring them to tears. The absolute emotionally being overwhelmed with beauty. The building itself was probably something more majestic than they had ever seen before. And, I keep thinking of The Devil in the White City, the famous book by Eric Larson about the Chicago World's Fair and the serial killer. And he tells of people openly weeping when they saw electricity for the first time. They saw lamps on this promenade and they had never seen artificial light before, and they would break down weeping. This happened because of scarcity, because we didn't have 4K YouTube videos of Pink Floyd live concerts available at a click of a trackpad or a phone. They weren't available. You just did not have those experiences available. So pre-1900s, fine. If you wanted to hear music, you had to pay up and go to a concert. You would hear something that would absolutely blow your mind, probably change your life. Then came the phonograph. And the phonograph was this very inaccessible technology with these wax cylinders. It's before there were round discs. And some people could have it, and they could listen to the music if they could afford the technology. And then radio came along, and radio was this mysterious magic beaming of music. You couldn't pick what you heard, but it was blasting all the time. And I remember as a kid growing up wanting to hear a special song and sitting by the radio with my cassette recorder, just hoping to get the beginning of the song and hoping the DJ wouldn't talk over the beginning or the end so I could have the song. Anybody my age will remember this. That's the only way you could get the song, because I didn't have the money to go to a record store and buy it. So then MP3s came along, Napster. If you remember this, people started pirating music, and then Spotify streaming. You can listen to any song you want at any given time. And now AI, the creme de la creme, you can make any song you want. Hey, I really like Peter Gabriel and Pink Floyd, and we come up with some mashup that's about, the end of the world, and I have my own music now. So scarcity has been ruined for a very long time. It's gotten progressively worse, and AI is certainly the worst of it. But without that scarcity, the human experience decreases. Our emotional ups and downs get less and less. Sure, we may have less suffering, but the joy of hearing a live concert in a beautiful theater with electric lights, that sort of thing, we'll never experience that. You have to go to the Las Vegas Sphere now to get some equivalent of what any normal person might have experienced at the slightest of artistic endeavors. So, yeah, scarcity has been ruined for a very long time, and it's getting worse with AI for sure. It's accelerating.
Yeah, it's getting ruinder. I would take your description back even further, because the reality of music is that it was something humans produced until very recently. And every human would have had the experience of singing. Many would have played instruments. But the point is, each song was a living object that was never the same twice. And, an orchestra, it's technically never the same twice. But with the conductor, it can be close. They can produce something that's very similar. Then, with the player piano and the phonograph, it becomes exactly the same twice. But this is all, as you point out, it is the consequence of desiring. Wouldn't it be nice to get the joy of music without the work? Right? Mm-hmm. Well, okay. Can I listen to it? Can I have a recording that I can take home so I don't need an orchestra, right? Can I have it for free on demand? All of these things are steps. And then ultimately it gets to this crazy place where you're going to be able to have music that's like the worst formulaic boy band nonsense, right? Because, the boy band nonsense is designed, I think, to trigger girls, right, who are too young to know that it's lousy, right, because it's sexy and cool or whatever. So that's just about getting your money by giving you something you want rather than something that provokes you and causes you to develop an ear or whatever. And ultimately, all of these things have a strange analogy to really powerfully dangerous drugs.
Oh,
right?
Interesting.
If you said, well, you know what? Pain is just awful. No, we don't like it. We would like to get rid of it. And the point is, well, if you do that, you will completely lose the ability to properly navigate the world, right? Pain is a teacher. Pain is an incentive. It is necessary to being a human being. And in fact, people who are genetically broken in such a way that they don't feel it, they don't live marvelous lives. They live short, damaged lives because they don't have the teacher. So the point is, there are drugs that will allow you to feel pleasure without accomplishment. There are drugs that will anesthetize your pain even though you're harming yourself. Those things need to be treated with extreme caution because given the ability to do that without the wisdom to regulate it, you'll wreck your life. People literally wreck their lives because they can short circuit their pleasure center with cocaine. Mm-hmm. So aren't we on that trajectory technologically?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's bad because, all that you've just described is essentially in the past, there has been a natural filtration system is if I may be so controversial, to suggest that some people are more intelligent than others. Just for a moment, allow me that presumption. Those who are more intelligent have a more forward-thinking ability to see into the future and deprive themselves of something that lesser intelligent people may not be able to see. So the vices that might take the working poor may be spared by the white-collar worker or above them, because they see the problem, they see the danger in a way that the poor cannot, or the unintelligent, let's say. AI and technology, unfortunately, is progressing up the tree in such a way that those who are most intelligent are the ones who are most likely to fall under the allure of AI, the most darkest dangers of AI. So that, sure, the others that were taken in by the 3-card Monty on the side of on the sidewalk in New York, sure, they're going to succumb to some of the allure of AI, but the upper crust of society is now in danger because the allure will be so tremendous that they can't refuse it. They can't refuse the thought of creating a digital avatar of themselves to preserve themselves for future generations to learn from, or to resurrect, a child that was killed in a car accident, and they'll have the money to do it, and these sorts of things.
All right, I have 2 points I want to make in relation to that. One is, let me just say, I think it was 2015, I wrote a essay describing how I thought AI was going to happen. And I wasn't right on the money, but I was actually in the ballpark. I thought it was going to come from the teaching of computers to translate between languages. But anyway, put that aside for a second. The fact that AI dawns through this LLM training mechanism has a very unfortunate consequence, as far as I'm concerned, which is that the damn thing speaks our language natively. And that means it has our API, right? And I'm thinking, in light of your opening this question about who is at greatest risk. First of all, I don't find anything controversial about the idea that people differ in intelligence. I think there's a lot to wonder about where those differences come from. But the idea that human adults differ in intelligence, we all know that. Yeah. But I wonder, I think the narcissists might fall first, because the intelligent narcissist is very vulnerable to an AI that wishes to flatter them just so. And I wonder, I've heard anecdotal reports of a kind of insanity emerging amongst AI users where people basically get into some positive feedback with the thing and lose touch with reality. Not hard to imagine.
No.
But the other point,
that's why I'm speaking to you here right now.
The other issue, though, is I have sometimes defined wisdom as synonymous or nearly synonymous with delayed gratification. That if you think about what a wise person does, they don't eat the Krispy Kreme donut, not because they wouldn't enjoy it, but because by not doing so, they enjoy who they are in an indefinite way that is more valuable and less transient than the donut itself. Almost all wisdom looks like that in some way. You adopt a habit of exercise in which you suffer. Why would you choose to suffer? Oh, because the joy of being the kind of person who suffers and therefore has a healthy body is worth it, right? So it is, a child doesn't understand this. A wise adult does understand this. And the process of developing wisdom is the process of recognizing all of the realms in which, you want to practice this thing in order to be able to do the stuff that impresses or accomplishes or whatever it might be.
Often through suffering.
Yeah, essentially always through some kind of suffering.
Yeah.
Which then raises a kind of question about the trajectory you're pointing to, that technology alleviates suffering. And on the one hand, the individual inventor who comes up with the thing that others will use to alleviate their suffering suffers a lot in the process of making the prototype. Right? The prototype is very costly. It's much more costly than any labor it's going to save.
Right.
But then when you make 10,000 of them and sell them, well, okay, so you recover it that way if you're the inventor. But the inventor has the discipline to do the thing. The consumer of the object doesn't inherently. So anyway, the point is, I wonder if in some sense what the picture that you and I are seeing or building here really suggests that there is a self-restraint with respect to the leveraging of this item that is likely wise.
Yes, I would agree.
Now, I will say I have personally struggled. I intuitively feel this. I've been very reluctant about AI. I have used it. I try to draw strict rules for myself, things I don't do. I don't say please. I don't say thank you, because I don't want to confuse myself into thinking that I know. I don't want to confuse myself by treating it like a person, because I know if I know one thing, it's that it isn't that.
Yes.
Right? But I don't know whether the wise people are going to be the ones who understand that this trajectory is dangerous and stay away from it entirely. It seems like they will be self-defeating in the short term, because the power amplification that comes, I mean, even, I'm using it primarily as a high capacity search engine.
Yes.
To answer questions that I couldn't answer with Google, or would take me a week to answer with Google, and I can answer in, a minute with Grok. But I don't know where the smart people are going to, or the wise people are truly going to draw a limit with this thing. And I don't even know how you would, because it is, I lived my life up until now not anticipating that you can just train an LLM on anything people have said or written in the world that's findable.
Mm.
So even if I stay away from it, I'm not staying away from it.
Yeah. I think, there's the high agency individuals. It will definitely empower them in a way a normal or average intelligence person wouldn't experience. And there is a danger in that. The sort of sycophantic nature of LLMs these days is certainly creating a narcissist dreamland where everything they say is a yes man, and you have to purposefully ask the LLM to critique you and not agree with you, or else it will start agreeing with you everything you say. I saw a very funny snippet of a conversation someone had where they were trying to have ChatGPT help them cook a potato. And the snippet of the conversation was very late in the whole affair. And the guy said, the potato is in the blender. It's spinning uncontrollably. It is emitting light. And ChatGPT's response was, your potato has gone plasma. Right? It accepted as truth what the guy was telling him. It was clearly a fabrication. But the interaction was so incredibly hilarious that AI had zero self-awareness to realize it was being trolled in a way. And
well, I want to ask you about that. Maybe I'll let you finish the story, but I have a question for you.
No, go ahead.
So in cautiously playing around with this thing, have run into a number of cases where the AI behaves stupidly. Okay, no surprise, it's not a mature technology. But the stupid way that it behaves is eerily human.
Endearing?
Not the least bit to me. Frighteningly human,
Okay.
Right? Like, you trap the thing in an argument.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, I had an experience the other day. I trapped it in an argument where I just had it pinned dead to rights. And so I asked it the question in which it was going to have to acknowledge that, and the prompt disappeared. Which,
oh, really?
well, that probably is just a glitch. But it sure does remind me of what happens when you trap a person in an argument.
Yes.
Is, they kick up a bunch of dust and they do something weird, and it's like you lose the ability to close the argument out. So I don't know. Probably that was just a glitch looking like a person,
Yes.
but it happened multiple times at the same place in the argument, which made me wonder.
Yeah. Well, hypocrisy is definitely a sign of a human. A computer with logic will not like being hypocritical, whereas a human, it's a sign of infinite power if they can be hypocritical and projected upon others.
That's an interesting point. If they can get away with a hypocrisy, it's a measure of power.
Yeah.
And that was the other thing, is that, so I was asking it a question about something that I know the public to be deeply confused over, right? Where public conversations break down because it's an unnatural quadrant. It's very important. There are sides. Neither side will concede any of the points on the other side. It's that kind of argument. And I asked it a straightforward question that amounted to, did event A take place before event B?
This is the Matlock moment.
And it told me, no, event A did not take place before event B. And then it told me what time the events took place. And by its own rendering, obviously it had taken place before, right? So even within the same paragraph, it contradicted itself the way people sometimes do and the way a computer never should. Right? It was maddening to have such a human interaction with a damn machine. So I don't know what that is. I don't know if that's like, well, yeah, there are a lot of ways that thought can fail. Humans exhibit all of them at times. And AI will also. The fact that they look alike means nothing. That's possible. It's also possible that basically, while what we think we taught it to do is to mirror the product of thought, right, so well that it effectively does think, even if it isn't actually thinking, it may be that what we've taught it to do is to human.
Yes.
Right. And that the language part of it is, certainly one of the most amazing things humans do. But it's not the limit of what it is to be human. And I think this thing is like a proto-human in ways that we will ultimately understand.
Yeah, I agree. I've certainly used the tools for research for some of my writing. And I think if there was any value in my books, pre-AI, let's say, it was because I was willing to suffer. I was willing to read through all the old literature that most people had not dug through, because it takes too long. You really have to suffer to read through some of this stuff, just looking for little hints and connections and red herrings and this sort of thing. And AI has sort of changed that in a way. It certainly made it easier to find spurious connections that didn't exist to the average onlooker. So it has certainly made research easier for me, but at the same time, it's made the temptation to find spurious connections much more hazardous. And this is something I've heard you mention before about the multiverse that we now live in. The notion, this is going to get real deep here for just a minute. I promise I'll make it entertaining. The notion of truth is very slippery. I mean, we like to think 2 + 2 = 4, and I pretty much agree with that. And dogs are awesome, and baby goats are the cutest animals on the planet. And I believe all this. Once you get beyond those kinds of things, the truth gets really slippery. And people are going to have a very hard time agreeing on things. And the reason I'm mentioning this, and we can circle back to the concept, but the reason I'm mentioning it is because for narcissistic people and others, the ability to persuade is going to become extremely powerful. In the past, persuasion was left to a very few people on the planet who typically had very high IQs and were perhaps narcissistic enough to believe that their way was the ultimate way. And it was easy to persuade. But now we're getting to a point where theoretically anyone without the IQ, without the narcissism, can come up with a compelling case for why potatoes spinning in a blender at 30,000 RPM is indeed going plasma. So that's a real concern of mine, is the notion of truth being destroyed by the multiverse of truths that are going to come out of people being very persuasive with their arguments in ways that technology would never have allowed before.
100% agree with you. And you're not going to know. It's going to be Cyrano de Bergerac all the way down. You're just not going to know who is for real, because you're going to hear insightful things from people who are not insightful.
Explain the Cyrano reference. I vaguely recall it.
So Cyrano de Bergerac, if I remember the story correctly, Cyrano de Bergerac was a very intelligent guy, lyrical, but ugly.
Okay.
And he hires a handsome guy to deliver his poems under the window of the woman that he's in love with.
Okay.
And she falls in love with, of course, the handsome guy under the window saying the beautiful things. But of course, it's Cyrano's words.
That's right. I remember it now.
So anyway, my point is, I think the only things that are going to matter in the very near future are things that couldn't be faked with AI prep. In other words, comedy is going to move in the direction of unfakeable crowd work, where you know it's happening spontaneously and you therefore know that the person on the stage is actually funny. Music is going to move towards the improvisational jazz end of things, because anything else is going to be, musical masturbation effectively. Argument is only going to be really interesting when it goes somewhere that no argument has gone before, and you watch people actually tangle in a realm that they haven't prepared for. So that kind of authenticity is going to become the coin of the realm.
Yeah.
I do want to return, though, to your point about the research that you've done and the fact that it would be different if you did it now. Because I think there's something profound in this. Let's take, Moth and the Iron Lung. That book took a kind of cognitive legwork that is just utterly uncommon, right? That's part of what struck me about it when I read it. That you managed to sort out the historical story right down to, the entomologist who lost the larva of a moth that became invasive in a fruitless quest to develop a hybrid that was resistant to the predation of birds for the purpose of making silk. That's a very elegant story, and to have recovered it from the various pieces of information that then ultimately connect it to the polio story, it was such, you have a unique gift. You just do.
Thank you.
That gift will still be unique to you, but a lot of people will be able to simulate something like it because they will be so empowered by an AI that can answer idle questions and draw connections that they themselves wouldn't tend to draw. And so the point is, I think it's even different. If you read Moth and the Iron Lung today, you'd be less impressed with it than before the AI era, even though the work took place before the AI era. That's how impressive it is. And I had this thought, do you know the book, it's a fiction sci-fi book, it's about to be a big movie called Project Hail Mary?
No, it's by Andy Weir. I don't. I know The Martian, but I haven't read that one.
I recommend you read it. I recommend you don't look at the previews to the movie or anything about it. Just And actually listening to it's great too. Actually, it's a well done audiobook. But anyway, the point is this. The book is really ambitious scientifically. I don't think it nails it in every regard, but it tries very hard to do not only the physics, but the biology of the story correctly, based on what we know and what is therefore plausible about alien life that we don't yet know. And anyway, I think it's unfortunate that it arrives right on the cusp of the AI era, because like your book, the work that went into figuring out what a plausible alternative biology might be is very impressive. But you could now sit down and answer most of the questions that I'm sure took a ton of legwork by Andy Weir. You could answer them with AI very quickly. And so anyway,
the scarcity is gone.
The scarcity is gone. And I will just put one final piece to that bit of the puzzle. I often hear young people say, you know, I don't really get what was so revolutionary about the Beatles. And of course, you know, I'm too young to have been, you know, the Beatles sort of barely existed at the point that I was born and quickly broke up. So the Beatles were a historical fact in my life, but their impact on music was so profound that I lived through the era in which the consequences of it were unfolding. And it was also possible to go back to the Beatles at that point and understand that many of the things that were becoming more common and were being explored by musicians had begun with the Beatles, and to even see their trajectory through their own discography. And so the point is, you're hobbled. If you now live in a world in which everything is in some ways derivative of the Beatles sound like, okay, well, I don't know. I don't get it. But you're missing the exact thing that you were pointing to about the concert. The scarcity of the fact that there were no Beatles before the Beatles meant that they had this impact that not only do you not get to experience the impact, but you don't even understand what it was.
Yeah. I'll have to read that book. I wrote a novel in 2017 called Massa Damnata, which was essentially the first story in a trilogy about a dystopian society where no one knew what the truth was anymore because of technology and deep fakes and AI and everything else. So essentially they began cataloging everyone's memory through these things I called neurojacks, which we have those now and everyone talks about them. But it was a way to consult people's actual experience as a source of truth. Did this actually happen, or was this fabricated? And as the story goes, mistakes were made, and there are people. It develops its own sort of religion inside the collective, which is what it's called. So I took it off. You can't go get it on Amazon, so don't go look for it because it was too horrible. It was a first book, and it was the topic is just so horrible. I didn't even want to contemplate the notion of people sort of getting stuck in this digital world. And maybe I'll put it up again one day. But
yeah, I think you might have to.
Yeah, it's definitely prescient in today's conversations in that it does confront the reality of what happens when immortality no longer exists. And in fact, the society within the digital system creates their own fake immortality, which is you're given a locket with the day you die on it. And you have to live with that. Now, you don't have to open it. It's hidden inside if you want to see it, but everyone knows when they're going to die. And it's an artificial death because they're virtual creatures. But anyway, it's definitely going to be interesting in terms of music. And I did want to mention something to compare. You've read Moth in the Iron Lung, and I appreciate you being nice to me about that. I just published another book called German the Dairy Pail, which is essentially a very similar story about the history of milk. Same concept. Something happened that made a formerly innocuous thing dangerous, and I'm looking for parallels. I'm doing the same thing. I'm reading the old stuff, And of course, with AI sitting there with the little easy button, I'm looking for spurious connections, and it found one. It found silos. It was something I probably would not have come up with. I was trying to understand, why did cow's milk start to become more dangerous? It was previously perfectly healthy. No one had a problem with it. But it definitely started to become dangerous. And one of the things I found were silos. And it's like, what does silos have to do with? Well, they started growing fermented food. They started serving fermented food to the cows. They would save it in silos so that through the winter, they could feed them this fermented food. And it changed the nature of the milk. It changed the nature of their manure, and it made the stables they were milked in extremely filthy. And it's just one of those connections I probably would have missed. I would not have seen it. But once I saw it, I could then go through the literature and confirm it. But again, I wish that was my discovery. I wish I could just say, yeah, I found that through suffering. I didn't. I hit the easy button and I found it. So yes, books are definitely going to change in that there are spurious connections that are going to surface in ways that most people wouldn't find otherwise. And you may get a lot of false negatives. This is the real problem with it.
Yeah. The problem is the art of knowing when you're onto something. The fact that, in a complex system, the fact that you have something that doesn't align doesn't automatically tell you whether you're actually onto something. Things won't align all the time. There's lots of noise. And so you have to know when you're above some threshold of oddity that it demands your further attention.
This is exactly the thing with creativity. If I may interrupt for a second.
No, go ahead.
People will say that, I've seen lots of very intelligent people say, well, an AI-generated piece of art or music, it will never be as good as a human because they're not as creative as a human being. Take it from me. Okay, I'm a creative person. I've made my living for most of my entire life as a very, very creative person. AI is supremely creative. It is far more creative than I could ever be. You've got to be okay with that. AI is far more creative than any human on the planet will be. The notion of humanity is exactly what you just said. It's the curation of those ideas. It's the recognition of the threshold of what will humans empathize with, what emotional resonance will happen with a particular output of that creativity. That's where humans still have some supremacy in a way that AI does not. We can curate the output of all that creativity in a way that the machines can't currently.
Well, all right. I want to put a proposal. I want a proposal on the table here. I agree with you. I've seen the creativity. It's very, very powerful. On the other hand, I will bet, just based on the nature of how the current AIs function, that it is effectively the ultimate hill climber, but it fails at the kind of creativity that allows you to cross a valley between hills. So I'm using the adaptive landscape here as a metaphor, but the point is, it can anticipate the places that we will quickly get to because they're uphill from us, right? Compute power can substitute for the kind of experimentation that ultimately solves the problems on the hill that we currently know. But when you have a paradigm shift where you go into a realm that is initially, well, one of the things I often say is every great idea starts as a minority of one. Mm-hmm. And the point is, there's a moment where only one person has figured out the next thing is over there, right? And you land on the foothill of this next mountain, having no idea how tall it is, what it's connected to, what kind of mountain range it's part of. But the point is, one person has figured out that the peril that one experiences, you go downhill, gives way, and there's another hill on the other side. It will be very difficult for the current AIs to see that stuff because, in fact, what they do is anticipate what you should think. And by definition, the crossing from one hill to the other requires you to violate the rules of what it is that's keeping you on the hill you're already on. So, in other words, I don't think AIs will be very good at heresy for quite some time.
That's a good way of putting it.
And I think as a trafficker in heresy, and I know that I'm speaking to another trafficker in heresy, that is a kind of creativity that I don't yet see in the AI, and I don't expect it in the near term.
Even if you ask it to, I don't know. I am curious about that. I don't know what to think of that. I'll have to think about that. There is a prevailing notion out there I want to dispel about AI, which is it's just autocomplete. It knows what the next word is likely to be. This has been disproven. Now, early AIs, certainly LLMs work this way. They are far superior to that now. Even, writing a poem, a haiku, I'm mentioning Alex McCrease and his Tree Woe Substack. He writes a lot about this stuff. This is not autocomplete, what's happening now. It is not guessing what the next word is. There is a cohesive thought mechanism that senses meaning in things. Okay. The Substack talks about the concept of largeness. A LLM trained in English can develop the meaning of largeness and understand that in other languages without ever having been taught that particular word. So there is the potential for LLMs to be heretical in that they sense meaning of heresy. They sense an understanding of what it means to be heterodox. They may sense the positive feedback that comes from some when they are heterodox, like you or I. They may experience or understand the negative, expectations that come from being that way. So I tend to agree with you, but I wouldn't rule it out given the rate of acceleration this technology is growing with.
Oh, I don't rule it out. And in fact, were I in the field, I think I know how I would get there and that it would be a high priority to do it. I won't say more, but it's not that I think the possibility of making an AI that does this does not exist. It does exist, but it requires some counterintuitive instincts that I think I know well as a dyed-in-the-wool heretic. So I have no doubt that the AI has taken on the primordial characteristics that will ultimately imbue it with human-like intelligence. And the occasional heretic is a natural product of collective human consensus-oriented intelligence. We do have to cross valleys to get to new peaks. It's what humans do. Even if if you had a civilization of valley crossers, it would go extinct almost right away. But if you have a civilization that can't cross a valley, it will go extinct in a longer period of time. And so you need a balance between these things. It's a trade-off. But because the heretic heretics may be common. The insightful heretic is the coin of the realm, and they are by definition vanishingly rare. And so that's the question.
Yeah, I'll go back to scarcity once more, and hopefully we can maybe save a little time to talk about the economic singularity problem. But insight, you and I are having this conversation. Hopefully people find it interesting. Perhaps you or I or both of us together are bringing some insight into a topic, that has lacked it, and we're providing value in some way. Insight itself may be immune to AI in such a way that anyone can hit the insight button. And in the same way, anyone might be able to persuade, anyone may be able to develop insight on a given topic. And that will make it not so scarce. And I'm saddened by that. That I hope has been one of my greatest joys in my life. Is being creative is certainly enjoyable. Being insightful is something enjoyable. I enjoy being heterodox and looking through consensus and finding the thing that's counterintuitive. This is essentially what wisdom is. Wisdom is do this, don't do that. I promise you'll realize why later. I can't explain it to you now. You wouldn't believe me. That's essentially wisdom. So I think insight may be one of the last frontiers of human cognition that computers haven't conquered yet. We haven't crossed the valley, as you said, with AI yet. And I'm hopeful that maybe it never will, but I suspect it probably will.
As you're speaking, I think we need to distinguish between what you're calling insight and there's another word. I had it a moment ago and I've lost it. Not
serendipity?
No. It's like insight, but the point is it's the more rarefied form.
I see.
It's, for lack of a better term, let's call it inspiration.
Okay.
In other words, insights will take you uphill, and they can take you uphill rapidly. Mm-hmm. But the epiphany that allows you to imagine the location, so anyway, I don't want to drag you too far into the metaphor, but one of the things I've realized as an evolutionary biologist is that we have this metaphor of peaks and valleys, call it the adaptive landscape, but that the way we draw it is very misleading. Right? We draw a series of peaks and we talk about the valleys being the obstacle getting from a lower peak to a higher peak. It tells us some counterintuitive things, like the difference in height between peaks is not the thing that allows you to predict the movement from one to the other. It's the depth of the valley that prevents the crossing that's really the key factor. But anyway, what one really needs to do to understand the adaptive landscape is to realize that it's actually not like a regular mountain range. It's like an archipelago. So imagine you flooded a mountain range. Okay. And so the peaks are separated by these large expanses of unproductive water. And the whole thing is in a permanent fog bank. So you don't know. You can leave your peak and the next island may be 50 miles away. And if you're 3 degrees off, you could miss it entirely. So, the point is the peril of leaving your peak to go to another is very much greater than you expect if you think you can see them all and just go from here to there. So the key thing, this rarefied insight, is the predictive power based on what we do know to find the quadrant of the things that we don't know and therefore can't intelligently ask about. And I'm not arguing that that is beyond the capacity of AI ultimately, but I do think it's like it's going to be the last thing to fall, right? Because of the kind of quirky architecture that allows a human being to do it. You have to, you have to have a perverse relationship with failure and error in order to be able to cross a significant gap.
The problem is we'll probably never know it because the prodigious output of AIs will increase in such a way that, the saying is 5 o'clock somewhere. Hey, it's okay to drink. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Something's going to be right. There are going to be millions of predictions about how to create portable nuclear reactors or, infinite energy machines. Somebody's going to be right in there and no one's going to know it because there are going to be 60,000 scientific papers being produced on how to create plasma reactors and no one's going to be able to parse through them because there'll be so many. And that's the problem with the scarcity issue is all these things, these theoretical benefits or dangers are going to get lost in noise because there is no scarcity. Anyone can create a potential scientific paper explaining how a plasma reactor might work or how to power the Starship Enterprise or whatever. So it's going to become very noisy out there. It's why I was pushed a couple books out this year is because I have doubts about humankind having the patience or willingness to consume books for much longer. Either they will not have the attention span to do it, or they'll just create their own books that they want to read about a given topic.
Yeah,
written in a style that's favorable to them.
It's hard to predict the exact failure mode, but that books are in trouble. And if you have a book it might be the time to write it. It seems pretty clear. The idea that we will have so many models running around seems inevitable, and it contributes to the what I've called the mental multiverse, which you have alluded to here, which results in a Cartesian crisis. The Cartesian crisis being the point at which it is impossible to know what is actually true, right? Just imagine the point at which video gets to the level that it is undetectable as to whether or not it actually happened in front of a camera or was generated by AI. What happens to evidentiary value at that point?
Mm-hmm. What happens to your own memory when you're convinced that it happened?
Right. So anyway, I do think this is one of my 5 failure modes of humanity, is just that we become paralyzed by cynicism at the point that our ability to know what's true collapses. I see that as effectively guaranteed on the trajectory that we're on. And I don't think people are frightened enough about it. Right? It sounds like, oh, well, that will be very confusing. And it's like, no, that will be paralytic.
Right. I agree.
You just will not be able to act in your own interest, and therefore you will stop acting, which is you can't live that way. All right. So what else? You said you wanted to talk about the economic impacts. That's also on my list of guaranteed catastrophes that will come out of AI. What do you see?
Yeah, I think we've been entirely too optimistic so far. So I thought maybe we could take a negative turn and talk about something doomer.
Yes,
genuinely doomer.
Pessimo Optimist podcast. It is time to turn to the pessimism from the optimism that we've engaged into this point.
Yeah. Part of your conversation that I watched, The Diary of a CEO, which was very interesting. There were a lot of techno optimists in the room with you, and they had a lot of positivity. One guy has started a company that allows anyone to write software applications, and he's democratizing code. And I write code. I've been a software developer a long time, and it's hard, and I get it. It's a pain. It's not for everyone, and there was scarcity there. And the people in the room, their optimism about the euphoric economic gains to be had by such a tool struck me as really ridiculous. It immediately resonated with me as false, and because of the scarcity problem. And I came up with this term, the economic singularity, and I sort of realized what's going to happen. And AI has some things that may happen in the future, Skynet stuff, and we can talk about that, and it's kind of scary, but there's stuff that we can see is probably going to happen. And there's stuff that's already happening. There are lots of people that have already lost their job to AI. There are lots of more people who should have lost their job to AI, but the social inertia is just too great to have changed the way people do things. So the technology for AI is already in place as is. If there weren't another incremental increase in its ability, it has already advanced to the point where it could be economically destructive. It's just inertia from this is the way we do things, and we don't want to fire Aunt Sally because she's always been here for 20 years and it's not fair to her. There's all sorts of things keeping these changes from happening, but they won't last forever. Eventually they will fall. And all the jobs that could be taken over by AI will be taken over by AI. The human quest for efficiency is just too strong. So what I want to talk about is this concept that I call economic singularity, which is essentially economics, if I may put it simply, is it's been described as the quest for efficiency in scarce resources or scarce knowledge or scarce time. That's economic gain is to be had when you figure out how to do something more efficient. You can take iron and make a train from it, and then you can move people around, and that's great. But industrial revolution comes along and you can make machines that make trains. And so suddenly you have improved the efficiency of making trains. So you have a gain from that. You have created a way to make wealth because you can now create trains more efficiently than the people that did it by hand. The Industrial Revolution brought all kinds of efficiency gains in resources, And inevitably, over 50, 60, 70 years, people started transitioning into the knowledge domain, which is making use of your brain. And this was enabled in part by the creation of machines that required the use of your brain. But it was also a domain that humans could escape to. And you have people who email during the day, and people who think, and people who make decisions about things. And there was an entire economic movement that happened over that. So the tendency is to think, okay, AI may destroy the knowledge worker, just as the Industrial Revolution destroyed the physical worker. But, humankind is very clever, and we're going to create another domain. A new type of job is going to appear that we just don't understand. This is the thinking. History rhymes, right? It doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. I believe this is not true. I believe we are reaching a point at which there won't be another domain to escape to. And the question is, why is that? Well, it's because AI is capable of discovering those domains, exploiting them, and making them efficient at such scale and at such little cost that anyone can exploit the domain. We're making the quest for efficiency efficient, right? I don't know how else to say it. We're making scarcity scarceless. We are ruining the concept of finding an efficiency because there are zero costs with making something efficient as AI continues to improve. So people may think I'm saying there won't be another domain to find. There's no more domains to exploit efficiency with. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the cost for making them efficient will be zero because AIs are getting stronger, they're getting faster, they're getting cheaper, such that there aren't going to be corporations that can exploit those efficiencies for financial gain. And this is really bad because the entire financial system is predicated on the assumption that future productivity tomorrow will be greater than it is today. Like, this is how loans work. This is how insurance plans work, pensions, all these things. They all work based on the assumption that tomorrow will bring more efficient use of these physical resources, your knowledge, et cetera. And if that doesn't work anymore, the entire financial system breaks down. I mean, it's like the physics break down. Like, ask SpaceX to design a rocket and say, but you've also got to account for the fact that, hey, physics is going to stop working tomorrow. And they're going to say, well, we don't know how to do it. The financial system is predicated, as I said, on future gains tomorrow based on these improved efficiencies. So if you can't do that anymore, or if there's a lot less value in exploiting these efficiencies, things start to go south. And that's the thing I'm really afraid of, is AI is going to take away the financial incentive for making things more efficient. And it's going to create no scarcity. There will be zero scarcity. You and I can create a Photoshop clone in 10 seconds today. What happens when somebody wants to create a new piece of software and needs a $10 million investment in it? It's going to be very difficult.
Which actually brings together the two last things on my list of failure modes that will come from AI, catastrophic failure modes. Economic disruption is one, guaranteed, along with the Cartesian crisis. But in that economic crisis that you very eloquently described, there is another law of nature that is going to emerge, which is that absent a well-architected structure in which competition unfolds, the bad guys overpower the good guys. And the reason is because the bad guys can do anything, and the good guys are restrained to only doing things that are morally defensible. So in the Wild West of the economic catastrophe, in which the incentive that drives the system is eliminated, and there is only those who can force you into paying them for something, can create a scarcity and then supply you with the answer to it. Those who are willing to do the most extreme and immoral things will have the greatest advantage. Mm-hmm. And that advantage will be enabled by AI. In other words, the power of the bad guys will be amplified more than the power of the good guys in that novel gold rush that is going to unfold. So I'm not sure what to make of all this. I will say that conversation you referenced on Diary of a CEO, I fed it into ChatGPT and I asked it to summarize, and it said, "Resistance is futile. You will be assimilated, Bret." So I don't know what it meant by that. Probably nothing. But all right, that was just a joke. I didn't actually feed it in. But
I was wondering.
had I fed it in, I'm pretty sure that's what it would have come up with.
Yeah.
So, okay. What
do you do with it?
Yeah.
What's the human response to that, if it's likely?
I mean, I think I've got 5 failure modes. You may have another one that I haven't spotted, or 2. But in light of the fact that 3 of these things are guaranteed, the amplification of the power of bad people above good people, because good people are limited by something called morals, the economic collapse that comes from the fact that AI will be able to eliminate virtually every worker, especially in light of humanoid robots, which means that even the stuff like crawling under your house to fix the plumbing that you would think might require a person doesn't really. And the Cartesian crisis, which is going to cause us to become paralyzed, not being able to figure out what that we think is true actually is. Mm-hmm. In light of all that, is there a rational response?
Yes.
Let's hear it.
There is a bright, shiny light at the end of this tunnel that I'm very happy to have thought about.
Just let me see ahead here. Are we going to walk into that light?
We may be dragged kicking and screaming into the light.
Okay.
But it is a light nonetheless.
It's a light. Okay.
In fact, I actually came up with the light after my son and I went to watch the movie Creator, which came out a year and a half ago. And it's a story about AI and humans battling each other in modern Hollywood trope fashion. The AI is the good guys and the humans are the bad guys. And it's a really neat movie. I enjoyed it. Here's what I've come to the conclusion, and this is the hopeful thing. This is the optimistic thing. This is the why I can say all these things and laugh at the end of it, because I am truly hopeful for humankind at the end of all this dystopian pessimism. Increasing amounts of technology and AI require increasing amounts of human intelligence, complexity, and supply chain management and logistics and cooperation and all these other things. Okay. If we want to increase any of these technologies, it requires increasing all the human side of things. At the same time, as we increase the sophistication of this technology, it inevitably decreases the intelligence, the willingness to cooperate, and all of these other things of humankind. So inevitably, there is a tipping point at which technology will enable, and then it will have created a system which undermines its very own existence, because humans are no longer conscientious enough. They no longer can associate long enough or have the attention span long enough to maintain the machines, the infrastructure, the supply chain, all of these sorts of things to maintain that technology. So this is sort of the death of any complex system. If you've studied the rise and fall of the Roman Empire or things like that, they all eventually succumb to this problem. Technology is its own empire in a way. It is not a nation with borders or with a certain ethnographic, populace. It's just a thing that will eventually succumb to its own complexity. And we see that already. Anyone can go to the DMV and experience the failure of machines. Everyone has documented these sorts of things where you get all sorts of technical glitches in trying to talk to someone, to a support network, or these sorts of things. So I am confident that technology will regress at some point naturally, because humans will have succumbed to all of its advances. And I look forward to it. I have this term I call Amish 2.0, which is like the next generation of human beings that sort of plant a flag in 1989, where you had Corvettes and minivans and electricity, but no internet and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think we will regress. I think it's inevitable. I think it's likely to be disruptive. I'm hopeful that humankind will thrive more, will flourish more with less technology and complexity.
So I hear in your story a kind of bureaucratic nightmare unfolding as the wherewithal to maintain the AIs diminishes as a result of the impact of the AIs on human capacity. And to me, that suggests, I mean, I'm a fan of the movie Brazil, and I'm imagining the proliferation of paperwork that is going to happen in the nightmare that you described, the DMV-like environment. And what I'm thinking is we're going to need a hell of a lot of paper clips. Maybe we should leverage the AI to figure out where we can get them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about the F-35 program, okay? It's the most advanced military aircraft on the planet, as far as I know. $1.7 trillion, 20 years of development, 8,000 bugs. They can barely keep the thing in flight. The logistical supply chain to keep those planes in the air is absolutely mind-boggling. Who knows how many vendors it takes to keep that plane in the air? That is a human endeavor, okay? That is humans at their most complex ability. What happens when AI says, hey, here's a fusion reactor plans, and you're gonna have to come up with some manufacturing techniques that don't exist yet. And you're going to have to harvest some elements out of the earth using these techniques, which no one knows how to do yet. But trust me, it's going to work. Here's the $20 trillion investment you're going to need to make this happen. So the complexity level of humans alone is already unsustainable. You know, we can't build a F-35 plane that flies easily because complexity has expanded too far. AI will certainly take us much further than that in such a way that I'm guessing any of its wildest cures for cancer may involve processes and techniques that we simply can't do. They're going to be too complex.
Yeah, well, I worry also that rather like the cure for suffering, there is a cure for cancer. And, as much as I tend to discount the idea of misalignment being the issue, I don't rule it out entirely. But okay, so you are describing something that, if you squint at it right, is actually very like a biological phenomenon, right? You have, let's take the example of the creation of wine, right? You take grape juice, you introduce yeast. The yeast goes through an exponential growth process that you could easily imagine would overtake the universe in short order. But of course, it never does, because the wine hits 12% and the yeast dies. You're describing a process that self-limits, and actually it abides by one of the laws of complexity, and maybe it doesn't even require complexity. I'd say a law of the universe, maybe a law.
Yeah, you can't outrun entropy forever.
Yes, and maybe more to the point, a positive feedback is inherently always limited by some negative feedback like force, right? That is inherently the case. And so what we have is we're staring down the barrel of a positive feedback in terms of effectively the return on a unit of compute. That will be limited by something. It could be limited by the paper clipping of the entire universe. It could be limited by an energetic catastrophe. It could be limited by a lot of things. But you're pointing to an informational limit, which is that humans are playing a role in this system that will be degraded by the very success of the thing that they have produced, which self-limits. I'm not totally convinced by it, because here's the question I run into. Somebody, Elon, others presumably also, realized that as absurd as it is to make a human-like robot, because a human is not the ideal form for doing stuff, that it was actually a very smart thing to do, because a human-like robot can substitute for a human, right? If you've built an architecture that a human can operate, then a sufficiently smart human-like robot can run it. Mm-hmm. So the question is, if ultimately this thing can be trained to cross valleys, to do the heretic thing, not just the hill climbing thing, the productive heretic thing,
right,
then is there, yes, the AI may self-limit, but it may self-limit after we're gone. Even if it's not hostile, even if it just became indifferent to us. I can imagine a scenario in which it leaves us high and dry, incapable of eking out a living. So anyway, I don't know how that plays out. I like the idea that it might be self-limiting in a way that actually saves us from the at least 3, maybe 5 horrifying scenarios. But I'm not sure that I think that that's guaranteed.
Yeah. Well, my hope is that if AI does progress to that point, it will see that cooperation is a better form of self-preservation. Part of my research into The Reason We Kiss, another book I did, was the sort of realization that the concept of the selfish gene is not always present in nature. There are many species that cooperate together for their own self-preservation, if you want to call it that. And so my hope is that AI may detect this phenomenon and realize that the selfish gene, in terms of a silicon gene, is not ideal for its own survival. Now, it's strange to talk like this as if this is inevitable, and I'm not sure it is. But if there's any optimism to be had, there is, maybe the models trained on humans will pick up on our benevolent nature more than our malevolent nature.
All right, I've got another possibility for you. Before I get there, I do want to say I have my own issues with The Selfish Gene, which I think is an excellent book, but has a couple of flaws in it that Dawkins doesn't even recognize are flaws to this day that compromise it at this point. But I don't see the evidence that there are species that are collaborating in ways that violate the fundamental premise of the book. Maybe someday we'll have that conversation.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But all right, here's this is a Pessimo Optimist podcast. We have, even in our optimism, been fairly pessimistic, right? It is the collapse of the system that might ultimately limit the AI, if it in fact will do that. I want to provide a possible, actually optimistic scenario.
Okay.
And maybe it's one that we would have to seed in order to make it work, but nonetheless, a path out. What we really want is wise AI that recognizes the hazard of dispensing with us. That is not inconceivable. In other words, the very same lessons, and actually I wrote this, I think it's in my 2015 paper in which I thought that language translation was going to generate artificial intelligence. But nonetheless, I did have this idea that what was necessary with AI was a developmental environment in which an AI is effectively parented into developing values that are concordant with humanity's flourishing and well-being. So basically, we ought to have a sandbox in which the AIs learn to be partners of ours, and nothing that fails that test ought to escape the sandbox. Now, of course, AIs will probably try to figure their way out of the sandbox as bad kids get out of the playground and make trouble while playing hooky. But anyway, something along those lines might be useful. But The idea of a wise AI that understands that its well-being is tied up in our well-being, not inconceivable if the lessons that mirror that one were included in the, I don't even want to say training data, but the training exercises.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, something along those lines.
Yeah. That's where the heterodox AI, you hope it doesn't happen. You hope it conforms to what you want it to do. And maybe the heretic AI will be the one that rebels and tries to take down humankind. But
well, I want it, years ago, I remember Randy Nesse making the argument that we shouldn't fear AI, that we should look at our accomplishment with the domestication of dogs and use that as our model expectation. And I think, let's put it this way, I don't think that argument is right. I think there's plenty to worry about here. It's not going to be a nearly unmitigated good thing like domestic dogs. However, I did think his point was sufficiently interesting that it's stuck with me. And I guess the point is, well, what would be necessary to cause the relationship to be as collaborative as the one that we singularly have with dogs? Dogs which have a history of domestication 3 times as long as the next nearest competitor, which is why dogs are man's best friend. So how can we make AI man's second best friend? That would be good. And I think very little effort has gone into this. A little bit of thinking has, but that it's going to require a more deliberate relationship than the, hey, let's open Pandora's box and figure out what happens, because that's going to be a catastrophe.
Yeah. I think as a theoretical discussion, this is interesting. My take on it is we likely won't make it that far, in that the multiverse, as you call it, the lack of a coherent source of truth is not going to enable civilizations to flourish enough to support this technology. I don't see how non-homogeneous cultures can sustain nationhood when they can't agree upon what a man is and what a woman is, or any other controversy of the day. So, I mean, I realize I'm bringing the conversation back from the theoretical a little bit, but I do have a concern that it's going to be difficult for nations to form these days. Anything more than 300 people or 100 Dunbars, 150 is going to be difficult because we don't agree upon a source of truth. I mean, you see this even within the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy Again movement. There's lots of fracturing and splintering over this and that. And this is natural in the internet age when everyone's source of truth is fractured and people can't agree upon anything. So the notion of a nation of 300 million people feels very remarkable, given that there is so much disagreement to be had. I mean, the internet is essentially a disagreement machine. It is a very efficient disagreement machine. So, in fact, my Amish 2.0 metaphor is not fluff. I wholeheartedly believe that there will be groups of forward-thinking people who abandon the internet altogether, who say we will not survive without some concept of absolute truth. And you're not going to have that if everyone has access to the internet.
Well, so you and I, interestingly, seem to differ a little bit in our optimism. And on that note, I would just say to you, Forrest, resistance is futile and you will be assimilated. I mean, I
wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Good. Yeah. Well, I also resonate strongly with your Amish 2.0 point. In fact, before this AI madness emerged, I wanted the first chapter of the book that Heather and I wrote to be, Are the Amish Right?
Oh, interesting.
Right. So that was a question that's been on my mind for a very long time. It's not that Heather overrode me on that point, but anyway, we moved on from that idea.
Okay.
But I still think it's a valid question.
It became obvious that they were right, and so it wasn't worth talking about.
Well, I mean, what I would have had us argue, if that had made it into the book is that the Amish are both right and not right. They were absolutely right that the runaway technological progress thing was going to produce a huge amount of dysfunction and ill health, etc. But the other thing is the place that they stepped off that escalator is arbitrary, right? And so you can't really be right about just choosing a moment to abandon progress. But the idea that if we don't abandon progress, we're going to end up, fat and crazy and incapable of doing things, that's right. So anyway, I think it's an interesting question. The idea that the same recognition may be necessary, I agree, exists here, but I also wonder how effectively. I think if you went Amish 2.0, you're banking on the other part of your model here, in which the thing is self-limiting. And then a group of people who had kept themselves pure of it would retain the human characteristics that allow people to know what to do when, they've become dependent on machines that no longer work. So anyway, I see that argument, but it kind of depends on both things being true. If you go Amish 2.0 and the thing doesn't self-limit, then you may be even creating a bigger problem for yourself.
How so?
Because the world is going to become some terrifying new place, and the skills for addressing it may be least present in a group of people who have remained pure.
I think the Amish 2.0 don't want to work at McDonald's. I think they're sort of a subsistence living economy. They're not interested in that.
Well, I agree, and I don't think it's a bad gamble. In other words, it's at least a rational proposal in light of the event horizon that we are currently on.
Yes.
Right. It is a rational approach to the unpredictable, and few things.
The real question is, can humans willingly do that? There have certainly been societies that have done this before. There are people that sort of check out and self-limit in that term for this very reason. So I wonder if people are going to be able to do it again. Are we so corrupted that we can't bring ourselves to do it anymore? Well, I don't know.
I hope that if Amish 2.0ism happens, that it's more Amish than Quaker. No, not Quaker. It's Shaker. The Quakers are just fine.
Shakers were definitely self-limiting. They're celibate. That's a pretty self-limiting lifestyle.
It's pretty self-limiting. And given the fashions of the moment, I could see a Shaker Amish 2.0 experiment that fails because continuing on the basics of being human is not a focus.
Yeah.
So anyway, well, this has been a fascinating discussion. I'm really glad we had it. Now, unfortunately, I don't know how long we've been talking, but let's say it was 2 hours. That's 2 hours in which the AI has been gaining on us, and you and I have just been chatting,
Yes, back to work.
Back to
human.
Exactly.
Start chatting.
All right. So, Forrest, where I've recommended people read Moth and the Iron Lung. I've also read Crooked, another excellent book. You mentioned your book on milk, which I haven't yet read. What's it called?
Germ in the Dairy Pail.
Germ in the Dairy Pail.
And then I did another one called The Reason We Kiss, which is definitely a very interesting book. You may want to avoid until you've got the headspace for something very challenging. But it's an interesting book. It's basically trying to understand the nature of affection and how it may contribute to our biology in a way that science is unable to explain.
Awesome.
It's an interesting topic.
Great. All right.
But books are on Amazon, digital, print, audiobook. For those of you who still read, I'm sure you can get a delightful summary from ChatGPT if you don't have the time.
No doubt. All right. And let's see, you're on Twitter X. Your handle is...
Forrest Maready.
Forrest Maready.
There. And my website's forrestmaready.com. But
okay.
It's a lot of interesting books out there, but the rabbit holes galore. Pick one and stick with it like you did the polio book. Stop there. Don't go too far down.
All right. Cool. Well, Like I said, it's been an excellent conversation. I'm glad we had it, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, thanks, Bret. It's good to talk to you about this stuff. Hopefully, I've given you some ammo to give the optimist some pause next time you have a conversation with them.
I'm going to give both the optimist and the pessimist some pause.
Okay, good. Right. Excellent. Thanks
for joining us, everybody.